been neglected. Some people that will be neglected, right? Take exception to it. But the reality is that what the TIF will do is 50% of that tax revenue that won't come back to the city but will stay in the TIF district. That will actually improve the infrastructure of the surrounding neighborhood. And all that stuff's in the TIF bill. And the comments that were made today by the Alderman from the 21st Ward on this having a spreadsheet, I think is another comment. And we should have that information. I think it would have been much more appropriate to have that comment and request at the committee level where we could have dealt with it in a timely way and we could have gotten that information out. We are here on the 12th hour and we are on a very, very difficult deadline to get these things done so that we can go ahead and get our application in. If we do not take action today, we risk, we're always at the risk of losing jobs, but we will make it a certainty that we lose those jobs. I think this is difficult, and I want to commend the sponsors of this because it's politically challenging and difficult. And this is not the type of thing where you wake up in the morning and say, yippee, I get to go out and sponsor domain legislation. But I too kind of like numbers like the Alderman from the first, and I've done quite a bit of research over the last few months on what's going on with the city. And anybody who doesn't think that we're dancing blindfold on an edge of the abyss, you're delusional. I mean, we have, the numbers speak for themselves. The Alderman from the 10th talked about it earlier. The thousands of vacant lots that we have, the unemployment rate, the poverty rate, the fact that our median income is way below the median income of the rest of the region. The statistics are mind-boggling. And to understand how it's very easy to come down here and say, oh, we should do this or we should do that. It's very important for us to understand how all this stuff works. Municipalities have strategies on how they pay their bills. And we can go ahead and let's take a look at a couple of those strategies. The city of Ladue, they are so concerned about the poor of the region, and I don't want to pick on the people of Ladue. I have friends that live out there. But the reality is that the city of Ladue was developed in a way that if you want to live there, you have to live on an acre lot. And because it's fairly expensive to live on an acre lot, there aren't many poor people in Ladue. And in fact, I don't think Ladue has a homeless problem. They take care of their own, and they're not particularly worried about what happens to the residents of the city. That's not saying they're bad people. I'd love to live in Ladue. It would be nice to live in Ladue. It's not my taste, but still, I understand the allure for some people to live there. There's Richmond Heights. Richmond Heights' strategy for paying their bill is that they have the Galleria Mall. They have a shopping center on Clayton. They got the movie theaters out there, and they keep all that sales tax. And that's how they pay for the services for their residents. And of course, we've heard in the news so vividly on the front pages every day. How are they paying the bills for the municipalities in Miramar, St. Louis? Through traffic tickets. 30% of their revenue is through traffic tickets. So here we are in the city of St. Louis. And we have a disproportionate share of the region's poor, a disproportionate share of the unemployed, a disproportionate share of the educated. And I'm a Democrat. My dad, people were talking about Pruitt, Iowa. My dad was down here when I was a kid, and he sat on the commission that looked into Pruitt, Iowa. He, with A.J. Cervantes, who was mayor at the time, sat in on the rent strikes, and he met with the residents. As a kid, when I traveled with my parents on vacation, our big tourist stops were public housing in other cities to see how they work. My dad voted for equal accommodations. He voted for fair employment back in the 50s and the 60s. My family lived this. That was what we talked about at dinner. And to come down and act like somehow or another we're different about all this stuff, we take this stuff very seriously. And I'm indignant at the thought that somehow or another we're callous and uncaring. The strategy for St. Louis, whether we like it or not, is one that we have to live with. The strategy is that we have businesses in the city with tax them, and we take that money from those businesses and we pay services. That's how we pay for our fire department. That's how we go ahead and we pay for our parks department. That's how we pay for educating the children in our city. The amount of that transfer of wealth from those businesses and those people working in the city is overwhelming. Businesses represent less than a third of the geographic area, but every source of tax revenue that you can track, they are paying well over half of it. They're paying over half the real estate taxes. They're paying over half of the gas taxes, the natural gas, utility taxes, real estate taxes, the electric taxes. We can't figure out what's going on with the phone taxes that are paid. If you call earnings taxes a business tax, they're paying $150 million on that. It's just, that is how it works. That is, taxing those businesses is how we take care of the poor and the needy of our city. That's a moral responsibility I, as a Democrat, one who's raised, feel very, very strongly about. And I don't take that seriously. I take it very seriously when we have to balance the interests of those who are recipients of our public taxes, the people who are using those services who can't afford to pay for them on their own, and how do we balance that? And it's something that we all struggle with, and we obviously come up with different conclusions of what the right way to do that is. But to go ahead and act like somehow or another we're insensitive about it is just, it's just not right. Now, if you go in and you actually take a look, back when Mayor Bosley was mayor, there was a group that was called the Inner City Competitiveness Project or something. Oh, here it is. The Initiative for Competitive Inner City. And they conducted a study on how we can go ahead and pay for our services to the residents in our city. And they conducted this back in 2000. And they went out, they said, why are jobs leaving the city? Because every job that left the city, this is back in 1999, they estimated each job that left the city cost the city $2,500. That's $2,500. The number one reason businesses were leaving the city, they went back and they interviewed people who left the city. They found 15 of them. The reason for 11 of them was side signage. They wanted to expand and employ more people and pay more taxes in the city, but they could not find a place that they fit them. And so therefore, side assemblage was the number one cause for them leaving. Now, we're down here, and we have to allocate very, very scarce resources. Our strategy is these businesses have left the city, and I'm like, if you don't understand the direness of our circumstances, I'm almost embarrassed to bring this up, and I don't know if this is even good public policy to discuss this stuff because it undermines confidence in the city. But I got elected in 1988. To put this in perspective, we have $1 billion budget down here. About half of that we collect in taxes. So we collect about $500 million in taxes to support our city, and then we charge fees of another $500 million. Of course, those fees are constantly going up. Our water bills are going up. Our trash collection is going up. Why? Because we don't have the businesses paying the taxes in the city. But since I've been down here in 1988, there have been 19 ballot measures on the ballot to increase the taxes for us in the city. Of the $500 million, take a piece of paper and write this down. Of our $500 million of taxes that were collected, 19 ballot measures raised $204 million. So we have increased our rate of taxation 19 times, and now it accounts for 40% of the taxes we collect. And that's because our tax base is getting smaller. So what we're doing is we're increasing our tax rates to make up the shrinkage in our tax base. And we've done it 19 times in the last 27 years, every other year. So what we do is when we run out of money, we go ahead and we throw something on the ballot that says, let's raise the taxes. So we raise the taxes, and then we run off poor people because the taxes are so high, they start leaving. And the quality of our services continue to decline. It is a very, very difficult situation to be in. And it's something that I don't relish. I'm hesitant to even talk about this publicly because it begins undermining our whole process. And of course, we had a solution just a couple of weeks ago to get those taxes again to put on a bond issue. Now, I have been through very controversial pieces of legislation in my own right, and I'm supporting this because I'd be hypocritical if I did not. But these pieces of legislation are difficult, challenging, and they keep you up at night. And the thought that you're going to go ahead and do this stuff without it bothering you, that you do it, like you wake up in the morning and you feel good about it, it's just crazy. Let me just walk through a couple of pieces of difficult legislation. This is why I think the Alderman come in for the third and fifth on the beginning, because what they're doing is difficult. I have lived through it. We've lighted within a domain 6 blocks of Botanical Heights. Last year, I called up the building division, the 17th floor, out of all the construction in the city, 50% of the building permits were issued in the 17th floor. Everybody tells me how wonderful Botanical Heights is. Well, it's wonderful over there, and they're doing infill housing, and we're saving historic structures, but none of that would have been possible if we hadn't passed the legislation that transformed that, re-imaged it, and gave people some belief that things could get better. And as a result of the 150 new homes that were built in those 6 blocks, the whole area over there is now blossoming. I had people, and that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have the support of the other members of the Board of Aldermen that way. I handled a controversial piece of legislation for BJC when they wanted to go ahead and expand into the park. Hey, people out with recall going through my ward. Today, if that hasn't happened, today, BJC is in the midst of a $1.6 billion construction project. And elected officials in our city are negotiating with them, and have been negotiating with them, about workforce readiness and employing residents of our city, hundreds of residents of our city on construction sites. None of that would have happened if we wouldn't have done it in 100 weeks. For 25 years, I've been working on Cortex. About 10 years ago, we passed 180 acres. The alderwoman from the first says, well, why don't they go ahead and put in the domain over in the, somewhere off of Lindell? Well, Cortex is about 2 blocks off of Lindell, and it's not 100 acres, it's 180 acres. People talk to me all the time, and they tell me, Joe, Cortex is unbelievable what's happening over there. All that construction activity, the new jobs, the energy, that is so exciting. It's a 25-year effort. I went out, I raised venture capital money, I raised site acquisition money, and I think by most people's standards, they would call that a great success. Matter of fact, I think it's probably the #1 economic initiative in the city, and I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't one of the top economic initiatives in the entire state of Missouri. But after 25 years, we are starting to build momentum. There are fewer than 3,000 jobs in all of Cortex. 1,500 of them or so are probably transplanted from other parts of St. Louis, and about 1,500 of them are net new jobs. So our most successful economic initiative over the last 25 years has netted us about 1,500 jobs, half the number of jobs that we would be losing if, in fact, we use this. As a result of Cortex, a coalition of civil rights leaders met with area contractors, and the hundreds of millions of dollars that are going on in construction now in Cortex It is the basis of that construction that has become the genesis of our workforce activity that many of the people down here have been involved in. And now those jobs are available to city residents who can then in turn go home, pay taxes, buy homes, and send their children to school. This is a very complicated and it's an emotional thing. I can't expect that somebody being down here is not upset. But we are in a very, very challenging time. We are dancing blindfolded on an edge of the abyss. I just want to make one more last comment. And that is, the cost of running a city is just, and it's hard, it's confusing, trying to get to the bottom of it all. There's 100 acres out there. We talked about the revenue that's coming in, but we really didn't think about what the expenses are going out. That's 100 acres that's going to go off the page, that'll be 100 acres we don't have to build roads for. It'll be 100 acres that won't have to be sending kids to our schools. It'll be 100 acres that we won't have to be cutting grasses on. It'll be 100 acres that we won't have to police if this comes to pass. Going ahead and providing city services, and this is a bit of an exaggeration, I'm not trying to be anybody, so please don't take this the wrong way, but we have one homeowner per 2 acres. It is so extraordinarily expensive for us to go ahead and provide services when we have people living at one homeowner per 2 acres. And I know that there's some businesses in there, and that's not a terribly accurate number. But that is just overwhelming when you go ahead and do that. What's happening in Detroit, they danced blindfolded next to the abyss, and they fill in. Selling their art museum collection. They're going up there, and in neighborhoods that are underpopulated, they're basically corking them off and not providing any city services to them at all. So we're down here, we don't know how close the abyss is, how close we are, we're all dancing around blindfolded. But I don't think we're more than an economic downturn or two, or a few thousand more employees before we're down here and we're laying off people, dozens and hundreds of people. And I just, I empathize with everyone's here, but it's a difficult situation. And I think that the solution that the Alderman from the 5th and 3rd, I think they're compassionate people, and I think they're creative people, and I think that the folks over at SLBC really want to make this thing a win-win situation for everyone involved, and I think they work very, very hard to try to make that happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from Turner.
Mr. President, members of the board, I wasn't going to say anything, but I think the Alderman from the 17th did make some very compelling arguments. He's almost got me into a position of revisiting my vote, but I want to kind of briefly explain that as I see this process, basically we had a developer who got a lot of benefits, and the city is supposed to see a lot of those benefits as well. And there were promises made of no eminent domain as part of that process. NGA, which is a very important employer, and provides some great stability in the 9th Ward and also in the 20th Ward, because I have residents who are employees down there at Geospatial, is an important employer to keep. However, we don't have any assurance that once we take these houses, that in fact they're going to go in and around the Fluid site. So, as I mentioned earlier, and we got a letter in our boxes from the federal government representative who basically is indicating that they're not going to engage in eminent domain. Essentially, we're going to be the ones that have to do that in order for us to satisfy what it is they're looking for. But there are other options here. We discussed the One is an option contract with provisions that if this site is not selected, that in fact the people will remain in their homes. Or some sort of contract B, so that if we don't get the NGA, people will remain in their homes. Because after all, the only reason we're doing this is for the public good. We're looking at the individual homeowners and their good, which is part of the public. We're also looking for the public good in terms of the jobs and what we're doing in terms of retaining a very important fire and another governmental entity. It's something that's really good for our city. But if they don't stay there, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to level this if we have even fewer people living on Cuba. So the only response that I have to what the Alderman from the 17th said, he made some very powerful arguments, and they're well-reasoned, and there's great background for those. The only difference that I really see is that on the 6 blocks of Mechanical Heights, and I think that was pretty controversial because of some of the historic homes as well, was that we had a sense that we knew what we were going to get. We knew that there was a developer, they presented what their plans were, this is what was going to be developed there. And even with that, it was very traumatic for people to lose their buildings. And I will tell you that it had an impact on other neighborhoods from people who have had to look for other housing and where they have opportunities to do that. Many of the people from the street town came into other neighborhoods and weren't able perhaps to do as well as they might have if they lived in the state where they grew up and in addition to that, with EJC and Cortex as well, we had someone there who had a track record, an excellent track record of EJC. We knew basically what we were going to get. We actually got more perhaps than we expected to get. We had an idea, yes, no one knew perhaps that Cortex would be as wildly successful as it has been, but we knew how we wanted to position ourselves in the city for this scientific effort. We had some idea of what we were going to get, and we weren't just demolishing buildings for the if come. That's the only difference. So I just wanted to explain why it is that I still have a concern about not selecting one of these better options before we go ahead and use
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 5th, you recognize the code.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to remove my motion.
Been moved by the.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 5th, second by the Alderman from the 3rd. The third reading finally passed. Board Bill number 263 for substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Tyus. Alderman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderman Hubbard. Alderman Garcia. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Palmer. Alderman Dillon. Alderman Ludwig. Alderman Murphy. Alderman Howard. Alderman Green. Alderman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Davis. Alderman Smith.
No.
Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvy.
No.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderman Wilson. President Reed.
No.
Alderman Cone.
I vote the same motion, Alderman from the fifth, third read, and finally passed, Board Bill number 263 for substitute.
Board Bill 189, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderman and Alderwoman Boyd, President Reed, Tyus, Flowers, Bosley, Moore, Hubbard, and Gracia, Conway, Ortman, Balmer, Villa, Arnold, Murphy, Howard, Green, Behringer, Bodie, Kennedy, Davis, Schmidt, French, Vaccaro, Ogilvy, Cone, Williamson, Carter, and Cruiser. And orders recommended by the Civil Service Commission pertaining to applicants seeking employment with the city in position under the classified service plan, finding that services in the U.S. Armed Forces is meritorious, adding new provisions that establish a military veteran hiring preference system containing definition, scoring system, and documentation requirements.
Alderman from the 22nd, you recognized on third reading and final passage, Board Bill number 189, committee substitute.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for third reading, final passage, Board Bill 189.
Moved by Alderman from the 22nd, seconded by Alderman from the 10th. Alderman, please proceed.
Mr. President, first I want to correct some of the reading that the clerk made. The board bill was not recommended by the Civil Service Commission. The board bill was actually recommended by the citizens of the city of St. Louis by a charter amendment that was approved back in November. I think we may have some old language. But anyway, I like to suggest and say that today is a great day for veterans in the city of St. Louis. I'm reminded of when I got off active duty and I came back to the city of St. Louis and how I struggled to get meaningful employment. I found myself working a job just a step above the minimum wage, and Donald was pizza driver actually in the afternoons just to make sure that all my needs were met. And so putting it before the people giving us an opportunity to create this ordinance is a powerful statement that the citizens of St. Louis are saying that we will have a policy that supports our veterans for the hard work and sacrifice that they have made to our country. And for that, again, I greatly appreciate the citizens of the city of St. Louis, all my colleagues that are co-sponsoring this bill. And the bill basically gives 5 additional bonus points to any service member who successfully passed a civil service examination for initial employment. If the veteran is disabled, it gives 10 points. Now, this is just like the state of Missouri, St. Louis County, a lot of municipalities across the whole country, even the post office. It's just that the city of St. Louis is a little bit behind. I'm glad we're playing catch up now to actually get forward to enact such legislation as this. But it also goes a small step forward that any veterans that's within the system of the city of St. Louis, it will give 1 additional promotion point if they successfully pass the civil service examination.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize close.
I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 22nd, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that the third reading finally passed, Board Bill number 189, committee substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Aye. Alderwoman Flowers. Aye. Alderman Bosley. Aye. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Aye. Alderwoman Gracia. Aye. Alderman Conway.
Aye.
Alderman Orton. Alderman Balmer.
Aye.
Alderman Villa.
Aye.
Alderman Arnold.
Aye.
Alderman Murphy. Alderman Howard. Alderman Green. Alderman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Davis. Alderman Schmidt. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvy.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
a vote, same motion, Alderman from the 22nd. Third read and finally pass board bill number 189, committee substitute.
That being said, a third reading, report of enrollment.
Report of roll, committee enrollment.
Board bills 250, 264, 210, 211, 240, 248, 212, 213, 223, 224, 234, 236, 237, 239, 243, 253, 254, 255, 257, 258, 261, 262, 244, 259, 263, floor substitute, 189, committee substitute, 268, 235, 242, 260, 269, 270, 271, 238, committee substitute, and 232.
All other business being suspended, the president shall in open session fix the signature hereto to the end that these may become law.
Get one of those selfie sticks.
I had one that was broken.
She finally announced it.
Still mad.
They should have.
Yes.
Yeah. You singer, and the Braunschweiger. Excuse me, ma'am. Well, sitting he's got his close lenses on.
Move for adoption of Curzon resolution calendar. Second on the motion, second by Alderman Quinn. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Dispensing with line item 21, 22, miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Monday, February the 16th, office is closed for President's Day. The rest of the week, we have no meetings. That's the extent of my announcement.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Further announcements. Alderman from the 18th, recognize the motion to excuse.
Just as the President, members of the board, it's my understanding that all Aldermen were present.
All right, excellent. Alderman recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I move that the board of Aldermen adjourns until Monday, April 20th, 2015.
Second.
Moved by Alderman Nathan, second by Alderman Business. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Stand adjourned.
Okay, good, because my stream's going to drop in about 7 minutes because we're almost at a 3-hour limit here. So that's it for the Board of Aldermen meeting. I'm still a bit unclear as to what's going to happen with BB 208, but I will find out exactly and try and tweet it out. I think the St. Louis American had a better idea than I do. So.